Hi, my name is Mike Naughton from North Coast Legal, and today I want to talk about Byrd versus United States. This is a case involving the reasonable expectation of privacy and how it applies to the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The parameters of this case are kind of strange. It deals with a rental car and someone who rented a car but then handed the keys over to Byrd, a third party who was not someone that was on the contract for the car rental. Notwithstanding, Byrd took the car, drove 3 hours out, and was stopped by the Pennsylvania State Police. When they stopped him, they realized that he was not the authorized person to rent the car. He was someone else who just happened to have this rental car. And so the police determined that he did not have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and so they searched the car. They felt that they did not need his consent. The Fourth Amendment protects individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures of a person's property, personal effects, or even their person. There are some exceptions to this, but the Fourth Amendment essentially covers over that unreasonable search by the government. In order to do a search, there has to be probable cause. Probable cause that a crime was or is being committed. In Byrd, the court held that the defendant, Mr. Byrd, had a reasonable expectation of privacy while he was in this rental car, even though he was not the person who rented it. And the decision goes back to the 1960s in a case of Katz versus United States involving telephone booths. Katz is an absolutely fascinating case. It's an individual, a bookie, who's going to different telephone booths and making calls to place bets. While he was doing that, the federal agents were outside listening into these calls. Justice Harlan, in a concurring opinion, raised this issue of a reasonable expectation of privacy and how that reasonable expectation of privacy applies to Fourth Amendment law, protecting people from searches by the police. Here, the court used the rationale in Katz to say that this car that he did not rent, he still had a reasonable belief or expectation that he would have privacy in this vehicle. There were two separate arguments. The government argued that there should be no idea or belief that Byrd had any expectation of privacy, just as if a thief had stolen the car and was driving down the freeway and the police stopped him. In the situation of the thief, there would be no expectation of privacy. They took something wrongfully and were speeding away. So the stop would have been appropriate and the search would have been appropriate without consent. On the other end of the argument and spectrum is someone who lawfully rents the car, the person whose name is on the contract, and they take the rental car and they go about their business. That person would definitively have a reasonable expectation of privacy. But going back to Katz, the court pointed out that you don't have to have a property interest in what it is that you are in when a search is being conducted. Katz didn't own the phone booths. He was just using them. Similarly, Byrd wasn't on the title or the contract for the rental car, but he was possessing it with the authorization of the person who gave him the keys, presumably. So he had a reasonable expectation of privacy. And the court in Byrd, and it was Justice Kennedy who wrote the opinion, affirmed that. They reversed the appellate court and said that there was a Fourth Amendment protection in this case. Two things were remanded. One was what happens if someone coerces or tricks someone else into giving them the keys for a rental car. That is an issue that goes back down and wasn't necessarily decided. And secondarily, what was remanded was whether or not there was probable cause at the scene to conduct a search. An open question under the Fourth Amendment that wasn't addressed by the trial court or by the Court of Appeals when it went up on appeal. So the Byrd case kind of bridges the gap between telephone booths, which we don't see often these days, and also rental cars. And when someone doesn't have the authorization to use that rental car from the rental car agency, but has it from somebody else, they still have a Fourth Amendment protection. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up. Please hit the subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Thanks a lot.